So what we're going to do first is we're just going to lay out a few center lines or center locations for something on here. So we'll do this hole in the middle. So you can see this is a x-axis or x dimension and y dimension. On the x, we're going to be out 3.00 inches, and on the y, we're going to be going up 0.50 inches or half of an inch. So we'll lay out, why not, we'll do both of these lines right now, or these locations. So first, keep my print nearby so I can check that. I'll go with the fractional ruler, and I'm first going to strike the vertical line here on the 3.00 location. So what you want to do is, first of all, realize about where half an inch up is. So I'm going to approximate that it's somewhere close to here. I'm not going to use the end of the ruler, as you can see. Like most rulers, the end of this one has been damaged. I think we scraped it ground it down one time and used it as a scraper. So I'm going to burn an inch. I'm going to start at 1 inch, and then I'm going to have to count out on purpose, so otherwise I lose track. 1, 2, and 3 inches. So at that point, I'm going to take my scribe, and I'm going to set the scribe down exactly where I want it, and I'm going to scratch one direction on purpose to the left. And I'm going to scratch again now to the right. So what I have is a little arrow indicating right where the middle of that mark needs to be. Now for the other direction, so for the other direction, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do it over here just a little further. Okay, so I have the 2 right on the mark and at the whole inch, and now I'm going to be going half an inch in, and same process. Set right on my mark, scratch kind of out at an angle, scriber goes back, and then I go back at the other angle. And now I have a little arrow indicating where that line's going to be. So at this point, I have 2 options. The more difficult option is to make another half-inch mark, so I'll do that over here again, and I'm just going to establish 2 points where I can put the ruler on. So here we go at half inch. I strike it one direction, come back, strike the other direction. So now I have these 2 marks which I can use with a straight edge to strike a straight line. And I know where this one has to be. This one over here I'm not so sure, so I'm just going to focus here for now. So I'm going to set my scribe right where that point was, bring the ruler up to that scribe, and then over here, tilt that ruler over until I feel like it's going to be in the right spot. So let me just test real quick. I'm going to pick up my scribe and see, no, I'm not there yet. So I'm going to move this over a little bit more. And I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I can tell it's going to go right on there. So I'm going to go ahead and make an appropriate length of line, about a half inch. Oh, looks like I'm off a little bit. And that will happen. So, no big deal when that happens. What I'm going to do is take my Sharpie, and I'm going to strike that line out. My arrow is still good, and I can still tell where I need to set my scriber. So here we go, second attempt. There we are. I don't know if that one's scratched very well, but there we go. Much better. So I'm going right through the center of my arrow now, and now I'm going to do this one, the vertical line. For that, just for variety, I'm going to be using my combination square. So I'm going to bring my piece to the edge of the surface plate, and it's the same process, but now that ruler is held at 90 degrees automatically, and so it's much easier. So again, I'm going to set my scriber right on the point of that little arrow, slide in, and now I can strike that. And there we go. Now I have a nice center line. All right. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now, I'm going to kind of skip forward. There's other ways to make lines, and I'll show those in a second. But let's go ahead and do that curve. So according to this print, we see that there are 3 holes, and they are a diameter of 0.50. So the diameter is measuring from side to side. if I use this tool at 1/2 inch, what it is right now, and I scribe that circle, it will be a 1/2 inch radius and make me a 1 inch diameter circle. So I actually need to cut that distance in half and set it for 1/4 of an inch. So I like these rulers for doing that because you can take these points and you can literally drop them in a groove like this one on the left is, and then I can bring the other side in and I'll hold it down and I'll actually feel it click into place when it's right there. So this is perfectly spaced at 1/4 of an inch. Now that I have that, I'm going to mark the location here, and I'll use a little dent that the prick punch will make to allow the point of my divider to be in there nice and secure. So I'm going to set that right at the intersection of those two lines, and then I'm just going to give the top of the prick punch one firm strike. And you can see I made a nice little dent right there to register that location. Let me hold it in the light here, and you'll really see it show up. So now that I have that, I can take my preset divider, and I actually like to do this holding it in my hand. I feel like I have a little more control. So my finger is going to be right on the other side of that prick punch mark, and then now it's locked in place. And I'll do this in 2 halves. So I'm going to kind of rehearse to make sure I can do this in one motion, and then I'll go ahead and put the other point down and then make that curve. So there's half my curve. Now I'll flip it around and do the same thing over here. And I just want to be very smooth and consistent with my pressure, not flex the jaws of the divider. And now I have a nice circle indicating where a hole might be put in this part. All right, so now let's strike another line using a different tool. I'm going to be striking this long line here, which is, as you can see, 1 inch above the bottom of the part. So for that, I'll use my hermaphrodite calipers. Now, these, unfortunately, you have to use the end of a ruler. So since it's 1 inch, I'm going to set the caliper here, and it's the same thing. I'm going to be holding the point down until I feel it kind of drop into that groove where the 1 inch mark is. And then I'll check it, and it looks pretty good. So on the part, I want to be aware of the fact that I'm not going to be scribing this line all the way across the part. It stops short where that feature that I just made is. So I'm going to stop I'm going to get to where that line's coming out, maybe over the circle. I'll go past just a little bit. So here we go. I'm turning that part this way. This jaw is going to ride right here. And then when I'm ready, I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure with my finger and just very slowly and steadily try not to swing it left or right, but just go straight down. And here we go. And I can always verify these measurements. I can take a ruler and I can look at it, and it looks dead on, perfect. So that's one way to strike straight lines. Another way that's fast and effective is to use a surface gauge. So this thing here is nothing more than a scriber held in a stand. And when you set the distances, you want to use a right angle plate and a ruler that you trust, like this one. And let's go over here so we can get some better light. And so you first start by making a rough adjustment. So it's pretty close to 1 3/4, which happens to be the next line I'm going to be scribing. And then if it's not quite perfect, no big deal. What you can do is you can work this adjustment knob right here. So I'm going to, let's see if it's going the right direction. Nope, it's going the wrong direction. So I'm going to real quick reposition this just a little bit lower. And now I have some adjustment where I can come up to my measurement that I want. And right there looks really, really good. All right. So now that I have that, all I got to do is replace here. And the line that I'm going to be scribing is the top line right here. So this line is 1.75 from the bottom. So I'm going to be scratching over roughly 1 inch. If I go over a little bit, that's not too big of a deal. If I'm worried about going over, I can use, again, a ruler on top of my part, and then I can see exactly where I need to stop scratching. So there's the 1 inch mark. That's where the mark should be, the scratching should begin, and then I'll just go off the part. So I always like doing this pulling, because if I push this way, it'll tend to gouge into the metal. So I'm going to go right around the 1 inch mark, apply light pressure, and then just pull to the left, nice and gentle. And I have a nice, it's a faint line, but you can definitely see it there. So that's another method. The height gauge for me, the surface gauge, I mean, is a little finicky. It can flex and move if you're not careful. So let me show you a better method. That's to use the height gauge. So this is a dowel caliper modified to fit on a base. And with any of these tools, you want to make sure that the surfaces are clean. You don't want anything in there elevating the tool and giving you a false measurement. So the first thing we're going to do is we make sure that its scriber is tight. So I'm going to tighten that knob. And when I drop this down, I should be getting a 0 reading. So you can see it's not quite, oh, it is pretty close to 0. If it's not exactly 0, I can loosen the bezel lock and then get it right on 0. And there we go. So now I can raise this up, and the next line I'll do will be that line right there. So it's 250 thousandths, or 1/4 of an inch less than my previous, and it happens to coincide with that feature, and it's marked out for me 1.50. So now I'm going to count. Every time I come up 100 thousandths of an inch, that's indicated here on the scale. So I've just gone up 0.1 inches. So I'm going to go up all the way until I see the 1 inch mark, and then past that I need to go up to 1/2 of an inch. So I'm going to go up further. Now the 5 is poking out, and if I pay attention to my dial, then I can know for sure I'm on the 5 when that reaches 0. So trying to do that by hand, the needle will jump too much. So what I'm going to do is make sure this little adjuster guy is in the middle. I'm going to lock this one here. And now I can make very fine adjustments by turning this dial until it's perfectly on 0. And then I can lock that down so it can't move. So I'm at 1.500 inches. Okay? And now I can make the next step over here. Now this is a carbide tip, so when I make this scratch, it'll be much more visible than the other tool I was using. And that's going to give me a very, trustworthy and fast and easy to make scratch on there.